Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. And we are back with another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. I am Amber Larkins, and I have with me today Mr. Darren Elliott. This is going to be a powerful conversation. As we were just chatting before we jumped on here, Darren is a survivor of narcissistic abuse, so a specialist in narcissism and narcissistic abuse. He also is a coach and is working on a book called Love Loops, in which he shares his personal story and professional insights of things he's seen throughout his journey. So, Darren, thank you so much. This is an exciting topic. I'm excited to get into it with you today.
Thank you, Amber. I'm really happy to be here, and this really is my passion topic. I'm very happy to be sharing with you and your audience.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I know it's a hard topic, and we were just kind of chatting before we started recording that sometimes there's a lot of trigger words involved in this topic for sure. So I do try to let people know that, if you are triggered by this sort of thing, just take precautions as you listen. But it is things that needs to be talked about, and we're going to talk about it maybe from several different angles. But why don't you just kind of start by telling my audience a little bit about yourself? And if I left anything out of your bio, feel free to fill it in.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. Yeah, I want to add that narcissism is wildly misunderstood, and as common as it is, it's often misunderstood in that it's a human experience that people are having, and it's something that we're often it's invisible for many of us. I can tell you, I grew up in a family that looked like a happy, bright, shiny family, and I lived in a small town, and my father had the self-image of being a good Christian father. He was a baseball coach. He was funny. He made everyone laugh. He told the best stories, and that was really his self-image. And that's the image that he created very well. And it was the family story that we were all sharing, honestly. But it wasn't the experience I was having growing up in the family, not at all. Although it took me a long time to figure it out, because whatever you grow up with is normal for you. It really is. Whatever patterns your parents are having with each other, and however you're being dealt with by your parents, etc., that is just normal. You do not know it's any unusual things are happening. You just know what you know. You come into the world with your little eyes and arms and nose and ears, and you just observe, and your family creates your first world. And if they have disordered patterns of behavior, you're likely to have no idea until you're in the world. If you're having relationships and it's like they keep going wrong and you have no idea, oh, well, maybe there's something to look at there. In the case of my family, I had a father who was cut off emotionally. He was jovial. He was jovial and cheerful. He would tell stories and laugh, and he loved people listening to his happy stories. But if you wanted to talk to him about anything serious, he shut down. So if you knew him in one setting, you might think he's a great guy. And if you knew him in a different setting, you might have a very different experience. And also, being a child of this kind of person meant we had very different fathers. I was a sensitive child. I was number 3 in my family. And my dad had very clearly in mind that his children should all be engineers who play baseball. I didn't fit his mold very well, and because I didn't fit his mold very well, I often received shaming. I guess I often received shaming for who I was, and I also wasn't allowed to pursue the things I was interested in. My brother, for example, was able to fit our dad's mold very well. He liked the things that dad wanted him to like, and he was happy to follow the path that he was supposed to follow. So he had an extremely different relationship with our father, and he idealized our father. This in itself creates an unusual family dynamic where one child, almost loathes the father and the other one admires the father. In my case, there were two of us in the middle who loathed our father, I would say, and my sister, younger than me, who also idealized our father. But what I didn't understand until much, much later, um, the way it came visible to me is I was having another relationship with someone. I was in a serious romantic relationship much, much later on, and I was in my 40s already, and or around 40, and I really fell in love. I really was just head over heels. I really thought this was the thing. Um, over time, boundaries changed, and over time, someone who had seemed like just the perfect catch and sold themselves as being my soulmate became less and less so. Um, and it came to one day after we'd been together and living together, and most of the time things were great. I'm extremely compassionate and empathic, and I could allow him to be right all the time, and that was okay. And I had to teach him boundaries, that he couldn't just make me wait for 3 hours and that be considered normal, or you know. But what happened was we had a conversation. His mom had seen a house that was a new development, and you guys should buy this house. And he proposed it. We should buy this house in this different city where we don't live. And I was like, what? No. And that was as far as the conversation went. I was like, I don't want to live in that city. I'm not ready to buy a house. It didn't even go beyond that. All of a sudden we were done. We were done with like an off switch. Like I never meant anything. Like it pulled my heart out. The on off switch, that instant devaluation and sudden you don't mean anything to me after suddenly like that. It really ripped me apart, and I did not understand what was happening. I couldn't recover from it. And my family didn't understand what was happening. Oh, it's just a breakup. Oh, you just really like them. Oh, this is just how. It's like I've had breakups before. I even had a decade-long relationship. This is different. I took a month and went to Slovenia, and when I was studying like how to get over a relationship and heartbreak and all this, and I ended up discovering narcissism and narcissistic abuse. And then I started looking at the patterns and recognizing, oh my goodness, like there were so many confusing times where I didn't understand what was happening. Because, for example, they would come home, and if maybe I was having my own experience and maybe I was sad about something, for example, if they come home and I'm feeling a little bit gloomy, maybe a friend's father just died and I was just talking something, that would be enough to have a fight. And I would have no understanding about it, because I'd come home, he'd come back, I'd look, and it'd be like, why are you looking at me like that? Like what? You're looking at me like what? Like Mary's dad just died. I don't care if Mary's dad just died. You're looking at me like blah 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 blah. Blah. And all of a sudden we're in this big argument, and I don't even know what happened. Now these kind of things would happen, and I came to understand later. When you're doing what you want them to do, they're behaving quite well, and they may be loving, and you're having a great day. If you're not doing what they want you to be doing, they might be punishing you, mean, grumpy, contemptive, blameful. Because of this behavior, this on and off behavior, it causes emotional manipulation that's absolutely invisible, because the partner ends up trying to manage the emotions of the other instead of their own emotions. I didn't realize I was always managing their emotions for them. I was always doing things to make sure they're in a good mood. I was always doing things to make sure not to trigger them into a bad mood. That is not the job of the partner, to emotionally regulate their other partner. But we're dealing with a crisis of emotional immaturity. And they were part of this crisis. If you're not fully feeling your emotions, if you've been taught to reject some of your emotions, you're not going to get good at feeling those emotions, and you're not going to mature emotionally. And
How long
frankly,
ago? How long ago was this relationship?
this relationship terminated about 8 years ago, and
And it was this relationship that you first learned of the terminology and what actually that there's a name for this.
Right, right. And I had no idea what narcissism meant, and I was pretty shocked when I recognized that's what I was dealing with. Um, it caused me to go down such a big rabbit hole because the therapists we had worked with, because we had all had issues in my family. It wasn't like things had gone smoothly up to that point and suddenly no, everything had lots of things had gone wrong and we didn't know why. We'd all ended up in therapy, and the therapy was trying to work with individuals, trying to make individuals feel happy and strong alone. It was the family dynamics that were messed up. Um, we adapted to a father, and we adapted in certain ways that was being continued in the family patterns today. And, for example, my brother, who idealized my father, had a lot of his patterns because he wanted to be like him, in fact, at some points and in some ways. Um, and he learned to be strong alone himself. But if you learn to be strong alone, um, in the way of you're not depending on others, then others aren't depending on you either, and you're actually not very connected to them. If you never lean on me for emotional support, I won't feel like I can ever lean on you either. And if if you're not relying on others for support, you're not connecting deeply. Like, we are pack animals. We are meant to rely on each other. So I discovered this this narcissism trail, and I remember I was walking down this little medieval um, street, and I suddenly just had a vision of my father as I was putting together the pieces of what had happened in this relationship, and I had never seen it before. I knew that I didn't like my dad. He did lots of things that really kept me small, but I didn't know that this was what it was, because he was a kind, friendly, generous, successful board of deacons family man. He doesn't look like a narcissist, does he? Yeah, he does. But I couldn't see it. Narcissism looks like all different things, but the main thing it looks like is not feeling with others. So if you're not going into your deep emotions, then you're not going into the deep emotions of the person beside you either. And that means you're not truly understanding them. You're not feeling with them. And that's what actual empathy is. It's that deep understanding of knowing that you're in pain because you came to me with your sadness. And I was like, and I feel it too. I see you feeling sad, and I feel sad because you're feeling sad. And you're a human that's near me. And we evolved for that and to release it together. And that's why when two or more, that we need two or more to be able to release our emotions and to release our traumas. You go on a desert island, you lose your mind. We pack animals really do need each other, and we need each other for support. So if you have someone in your life who's learned to be strong alone, and that's many, many men who've learned to be strong alone because they were taught that's what they're supposed to do, they're not interdependent. And there's lots of partners who feel alone with a person who's strong alone. You're not meant to be strong alone. You're meant to be strong together. And that has been so hugely misunderstood. It's become a cultural misunderstanding, especially across America. Americans are Americans first. Everyone has much more in common than they have as differences. And when we go down to their hearts, most of them actually, they just want to be able to love each other. They just want to be able to raise their families. They just want to be able to live with freedom and security and to feel safe and cared for, to feel their love and freedom. Most Americans have that feeling. Most. They're not, it's not like we're half this way and half that way. No, most really have those values, but it's just not what's happened. The political scene became polarized. So we're not seeing that. We're seeing a narcissistic polarized response. That's
Well, there's a sense of
emotional
division.
immaturity. There's a
Yeah.
sense of division, and that's narcissism. They divide to conquer. Because when I'm experiencing narcissism, I have a feeling of me versus you. And if it's me versus you, and I have if I have negative assumptions, then I'm assuming you're going to lie. I'm going to lie first. I assume you're going to cheat. I'm going to cheat first. But there's a negative assumption for both sides. It's like, I'm going to behave poorly because I know you're behaving poorly.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people, and this is probably a misconception too, because you see all these things on the internet about how bad like victimhood is, and I'm not discounting that. But when we take a second and look at exactly what you said, which is you said it was it was a childhood emotional maturity issue. And when we look at psychology, which I'm no expert on psychology, but I do know this much, that sometimes we can get stuck for fear of truly revealing ourselves or revealing our emotions. And if you have someone who has been brought up that has been constantly not allowed to share emotions, not allowed to be who they truly are, like they've tried to live inside of these confines of someone else's ideology of what they should be, you can see how these traits can start to develop, because as they grow into adulthood, it's like almost their childhood trauma has not they've not been able to fully embrace the things that they were as a child. Sometimes when you're not safe, you don't feel safe to reveal emotions, or you don't feel safe to share how you feel, or you don't feel safe to cry or to be
Right.
vulnerable. It's like, okay, now you've put up a wall and you've gotten stuck in a place that until you can dig through that wall, I don't know that there's true fulfillment in that person's life. And that really is sad when you think about it.
You got on the crux on it. Vulnerability. You hit the nose right on the head. It's all about vulnerability. Yes, absolutely. It's We need to be sharing our inner experiences with others for them to be processed and understood. If I'm keeping them to myself, they're going to get honestly, they're going to get deranged. Just
Mhm.
like, Tom Hanks in Castaway on the desert island, his thoughts go further and further from reality. We need to bounce our thoughts off others to know what's real. If we're keeping them all to ourselves, then we don't know what's real. And that's what's
Mhm.
happening with narcissism. One, they're not checking out their thoughts with others. They're over identifying with their thoughts, which is a childish process. Um, and then they're sharing their thoughts as if fact, which is a childish process, believing my thoughts are true. Then the dragon marched over and danced with the princess, and they can believe their words very easily. Um, Another narcissistic defense that happens is doubling down without thinking. Because if you're afraid, your brain is turned off. So there's a lot of fear mongering to make people afraid. Now they're not thinking rationally. And then in that immature process to also to say no as an automatic response and then double down without actually listening to what we're talking about. That has become a common reaction. Uh, People holding their ground despite not knowing what's going on. Like really, it's people are waking up to things that they didn't realize was going on because they had doubled down for a little too long and were not open to new input. There were even
Are
people who thought they were fighting for different people. Hmm.
you're referring to the political spectrum?
Yeah, we've been watching narcissism be normalized and as acceptable. We've been watching someone lie, 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 lie. We've been watching gaslighting and fear mongering. To even if we have an opponent, we don't call them names and like that. It's childish behavior, right?
It's very
Gaslighting
childish.
is childish behavior. Turning tables, no, I didn't, you did, is childish behavior.
Mhm,
Projecting is childish behavior. When you're
mhm,
suffering from narcissism, you think everyone else is playing the same game you are, so you project onto them that they're doing what you're doing.
mhm,
So, and you may even believe yourself that they're doing the same as what they're doing, right?
mhm,
You may truly believe that you're innocent and this is a witch hunt, or you may, and
mhm.
despite all the facts, my father never believed he needed dialysis, and he was on dialysis for 10 years. Uh, they can really, it didn't fit his identity of who he was as a person. It
Mhm,
didn't fit that, so he was able to reject it. Um,
mhm,
and my father came across his narcissism honestly, like anyone. He came from the generation, first of all, that was taught, to be a man means to be strong and to not feel fear. Um, Men and women, we all have nervous systems. This was a myth. This was a myth that went very, very wrong. Men have nervous systems, and what happened to many men in recent previous generations, for example, a lot of men went off to war. They experienced horrible traumas or loss or um, things, experiences that overwhelmed them, experiences that trapped in their body as trauma. Body, our trauma does get stored in our body as energy. They come back to their families in the US or wherever they were. They're welcomed home and expected to be happy, but they have this trauma in their body that's telling them everything's wrong, everything's wrong, everything's wrong. And it's still happening because we did not understand trauma back then. We didn't understand that a soldier goes to war and comes back with trauma that they need to process and release to literally remove that feeling in their body that they're in a war panic situation. So now they're fighting with their spouses. Now they're not able to deal with their emotions. And a lot of kids had that as the parent model, and it was okay because you couldn't blame dad for it. He came back from war a different person. But the problem with that is dad was out of touch with emotions. So a kid comes to dad like, "Dad, my Billy punched me in the face." Dad might not have compassion that Billy punched him in the face. Dad might be like, "Oh, that's nothing. I went to war. Buck up and be a man. Stop crying." That teaches a lack of empathy, right? That lack of care causes children to shut down. It passes on the PTSD from the father to the child. And the mother gets used to being abused, frankly. And then studies show the way you treat your partner, husbands, the way you treat your wives, it's very likely how your daughter is going to get treated by her partner. So think about that when you're treating your wife any kind of way. You should be treating your wives the same way you would love your daughter to be treated. You want them to be cherished and loved for who they are, right? Your wife is no different. She's someone's daughter as well, and she deserves your love and respect at all times. When you're suffering from narcissism and emotional immaturity, you might lack the object constants that keeps us in our good version of ourselves. Because when you get triggered into narcissism, you literally forget that this is the person who I love who's on my team, so I shouldn't be attacking them because I know they didn't mean to hurt me. In the case of narcissism, it's much like PTSD, much like the grandpa that had PTSD, and his wife said something that triggered his PTSD, and now he's launching at her with anger because it triggered a rage. Nothing to do with her calling him for dinner or saying, "Why are you 5 minutes late?" But it caused the thing. It's the same with narcissism. If they're not dealing with their emotions, if they're trying to pretend all is well and everything's good and they're not including the real experience, they can get triggered into it. And they can get triggered into it by just like a look of confusion even might trigger someone who's really sensitive. They need to be mirrored back that they're good. And they need to be mirrored back that they're good at all times. And if you mirror them back any other way, they're gonna defend that mirror. They're gonna attack that mirror because it causes them to feel those emotions that they're avoiding. They're literally avoiding the whole half of themselves. We're all flawed humans. We're all imperfect. Every single one of us are imperfect, and we fall in love with each other's flaws. In fact, when you watch a reality TV show, when someone comes out and shares the difficult things they've dealt with, that's when we fall in love with that character. We don't fall in love with their perfection. But when you're dealing with narcissism, you're trying to be perfect and try to form the perfect picture, and it's not even what we fall in love with, honestly. But it's the game they think everyone's playing.
It comes down to you try to gain acceptance and validation for who you are. So when you get into a relationship with someone who struggles with narcissism, what happens is that you're constantly looking for approval from that person, and years of this ongoing this is the thing, it's so hard to put your finger on it, and you can explain it to someone, and it could be completely amiss. They're like, I don't really see the bad in that, because it's not one bad thing. It's a combination of bad things that have happened over an extended period of time that has molded you and shaped you and twisted your mind and made you believe that you have to do these things to be accepted and to be validated in that relationship. And it's really sad on both parts. And I want to bring up something that you did say about gaslighting, and specifically in regards to the political spectrum that we've seen here in America. And I know you're in Canada, but just recently with the political election and everything that has happened, one of the things that I was the most amazed by, well, I don't want to say that I was the most. This was one thing that truly amazed me, was that mainstream media can say one thing and then people believe it as emphatic fact, like it is that way. And I was reading over some on social media just recently, and there was like someone had mentioned vaccines, And I know vaccines like a trigger topic, and people like they get all up in arms. Like that's one of those things that it's like you're right or left, right? You believe in it or you don't. Um, and someone was saying, "Oh, you better hurry and get your children vaccinated because you're not going to be able to have them vaccinated now with this new administration." And it's just like, who said we're doing away with vaccines? Like, who said that? Um, and we see it on both sides, not about the vaccines. I'm just using that as an example. But it's like we see on both sides this idea of like, we're telling you this, and now you have a public the public conform into this thing of it's emphatic. This is the way that it is. And the danger in that is that people just blindly believe because mainstream media says that it's true. Mainstream media is the most toxic, narcissistic thing that I have seen in my lifetime. I mean, the way that they frame things, and framing is a huge thing with narcissism as well. If someone can frame it in a certain way, they can reframe. You've seen this with attorneys, how they'll just reframe it, and it sounds okay now. So
I want to address that because you're
sure.
making a polarized judgment of mainstream media when mainstream media is not all equal. Um, the first thing that happens to destroy a democracy is when you don't believe that mainstream media can be believed at all, because then people don't know what to believe, and that causes the fear to get way, way, way higher. Um, I can say I believe media, certain media, certainly. I do, as a Canadian watching American media, I see an awful lot of fear mongering in American media. The news is way scarier. That even the music played is like boom, 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 and I'm like, oh my god, my heart rate is racing. Canadian news is actually very different if you watch the CBC. It's they intentionally try to keep it relaxed, trying to keep it as balanced. And I do believe their coverage and their fact checking. When someone refuses to have fact checking, that should be an enormous red flag. Fact checking should be allowed, especially when there's so much gaslighting and so much just saying whatever someone wants to be true.
Let me ask you a question
Mhm.
about that though. So,
Yeah.
because I actually I don't watch a lot of news because I am one of those people who kind of discounted mainstream media as
Yeah, yeah.
this stuff is so, I don't know. You got to dig through layers of what's true and what's not true. So I
But
just
much
kind of,
less so, though, Amber. Some things are entirely fake. You're talking about reframing but at least some of the details are fake. The alternate news is usually just upside down, and a lot of it 100% invented for profit. And now they've seen where a lot of it has come from Russia, and in Canada too, a lot of the fake news has come from Russia. Currently so. Um, when it comes to people making guesses about vaccines and such, right, that's hard. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. We do know who he's appointing. We do know it's going to become a banana republic if he actually appoints people who have no idea what they're doing, positions they have no business being in. And we do know that if he takes government positions that are actually skill-based and makes them into loyalist-based, that it will turn the economy upside down. And all the economy institutions predicted that everything would bomb if Trump was elected. All the Fortune 500 companies and all the major accounting firms said that the economy would tank under Trump and that it would continue to get better under Harris. All of them from every country in the world. And there were people who just did not even understand that tariffs are a tax. Tariffs are a tax. They make your goods cost more. It was so misunderstood, and the crazy increase in inflation, if he does what he says he's going to do, it'll be like never seen before. So there is some legitimate panic when you see the people he's appointing. It's not going to be the same as 4 years ago. Last time he had people working in the White House who kept him in check. Last time he had judges who kept him in check. This time he doesn't. This time he has no checks and balances. That's real. That's real. The system has changed. So
so
people were fear mongering on one side. The other side, they were just raising the alarm bells that were legit alarm bells. The alarm bells are going off here. I can tell you, we would have had our massive
so I mean,
all
I
over the
agree.
world.
I agree with you that there's definitely been a shift. I can definitely agree with that. Um, I personally like this is probably where we're gonna agree to disagree here, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I personally is specifically when we're talking about him appointing RFK, that I love that move personally because I don't want to say I'm anti-vax, but I don't trust vaccines. I didn't trust them. My son had a reaction to a vaccine when he was a baby. I don't agree with the scheduling that they do. I'll be 45 in December. When I was a kid getting vaccines, it was way less than what it is now. Which this is just one topic. There's many topics that I would love to sit and talk with you because this is the problem that we have in this country in
People aren't
America.
talking. Yeah, people are
People are
not
not
sitting down to
talking
talk. Hmm.
and no one wants to. It's like, oh no, it's my way, I believe this way, and it's my way or it's no way. And that's not how I want to raise my kids to believe. Like, no, I want you to go get all the information. And what's even better is talking to opposing sides. If you agree with something, if I agree with, I'm just using this as an example, but if I say, no, I love that Trump picked RFK for like the health advisor, and you say, I think that's the biggest mistake ever. Why can't two educated people sit down and have a conversation about this? Because you may open my eyes to things I didn't realize, and vice versa. But this is when it boils down to this, back to this spiritual, to the spirit of narcissism. I'm gonna say I feel like, because I when I envision narcissism, it's like a wave that takes over like an entire populace. And I think that's really what we're seeing here is on both sides, because you'll see people that get so up in arms about it must be this way. And then you have this people that saying it must be this way. And it's like, okay, so now we're just creating division when it boils back down to exactly what you said earlier, which is we all just want health and safety. We want, to love each other. We want to respect each other. And I love that I can sit down and have conversations with someone. I think that that is the sign of maturity versus immaturity when people can't even, it's like, oh, I'm not going to talk about this with, no, it's my way. It's like, why? Because it boils down to asking questions. Like, let's just ask questions. I'm curious. I want to know, and I'm not going to get mad about it. Why? Because
Yeah,
that's,
curiosity is so important. And it's hard for the rest of the world to fathom what Americans go through in an election because we don't have anything like it. Nothing like it at all. Like it is not a media circus month after month after month after month. It doesn't take up all the airways over here. It really is a very, very different thing in America.
do you
The
guys
the
have
whole
the
system.
same? Is
Mm-mm.
this okay? I'm really not familiar with Canada at all, so I didn't
Yeah,
know
we have a
like your.
totally different system. We have a parliamentary system, which is based on the same system as England, um, sort of copied and brought over here. It wasn't based on resistance, right? It came from a different. We were a colony that just sort of separated when we were ready to cut the umbilical cord.
Mhm.
Um, America was quite a different creation altogether. It was a lot of people coming together and um, creating
Mosh
its own
pit.
thing, all in a mosh pit, but creating their own thing from anew. We didn't create our own thing from anew. We replicated the English system. You guys created your own project over there,
So
right?
I'm
It was the
curious.
democracy experiment, right?
I'm super curious though. You guys as Canadians watching this, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, this shit show kind of like unfold, right? You seeing all this stuff. You're seeing Americans get like so mad at each other. They want to kill each other. What is going through the minds of Canadians as they're watching this? Is that scary for you guys to see this, thinking that we're right next door?
Oh yeah, for sure, it is scary. Um, no question, no question. It's a bit like a soap opera instead of a political show. I mean,
Mhm.
it is so full of drama and so full of angst. It's quite different, right? It's different than watching an election in any other country. The First Amendment changed things to some degree, but it's gotten so polarized and so charged and so big and so expensive and so funded. It's just so enormous. It's just yeah, it takes a lot of attention. And in particular, um, This took so much attention, just people merely arguing what's true and what's not true, merely arguing, trying to get through facts and trying to, there's so much time just working on disinformation that could have been used on working on policies, that could have been
Hmm.
used on settling things, that could have been used on actual work instead of just defending against things that weren't true. Um, it's it's it's
I
worrisome
agree.
because, we believe in climate change. We're experiencing climate change. The temperatures are warmer here. My mom's climate zone has changed. It used to be a potato zone, now it's a grape zone. Um, so to have a government that is going to deny climate change is very scary. Most people think it's at a point where it's either right now or no return. And America is a leader in the world. We need America to be the leader in the world, honestly. We need you. We need you to be a leader, and a moral leader, and a world leader for the environment. And, truly, America has taken the role of leader in a lot of ways, right? And as a Canadian, I think we need that, honestly. Like,
I think we'll definitely see some interesting things in the future unfold that is scary. I do think it's scary. I mean, no, we could like chat about this all day, and I really would love to. I'd love to chat longer about this, but I think when we just bring it back down to this idea of like, what can I do? And this is a question I ask myself almost on a daily basis. What can I do? Because I'm an empath like you. I feel people's emotions. I feel the pain. I see the pain that people are going through. And I don't have to agree with someone's views or opinions to see their pain or to feel their pain or to empathize with their pain. And so I go back to this question that I ask myself, which is, what can I do to continue to make the world a better place? And I think that one, not to get super emotional, like to be able to control emotions. Reacting to things is never the answer, like just reacting out of just like anger or fear or animosity or whatever. But truly taking a moment if you need to and to process everything and then to be to approach people in a respectful manner and a
yeah,
love
it's,
people.
see it as the second wave approach. We all should be doing a second wave approach. There's so you say something to me, anger, and it's going to hit me in a certain way, like, oh, that's not the reaction I meant to do it, and then I bring myself into regulation and think about it, and then there's another wave. Um, it's the second wave. Yeah, and we need to regulate ourselves before we get into these discussions. And when we're
Yeah.
upset, we need to calm down to come back to them, because when you're
Hmm.
really upset, most of your brain is turned off, right? And we know that when you're angry, you do lose your compassion and you lose your reason and all sorts of things. So we're not going to be, and we're seeing people, in that state saying things like, no, no, we need to come into a calmness and be, feel connected to ourselves and others before we're throwing our words around. But a lot of people learn to disconnect from themselves. When a man is taught not to feel fear or not to fear, even feel tenderness, some of them, right? Like they not supposed to feel tender. You can't selectively cut off your emotions, unfortunately. You're cutting off this part of your nervous system, learning not to feel it. You're not going to feel as much joy either, and you're not going to feel as much of all the things coming from your nervous system, which creates a feeling of emptiness.
Hmm.
And that's an emptiness that people feel with alcohol, and they feel with addiction, and they feel with shopping. And we need to connect deeply with each other. I think the biggest thing we could recommend is to tune into an American, Brene Brown, down in Texas. She is super talking about vulnerability.
Mm.
She has some really good talks. Vulnerability is a strength. We need to, and it's not a weakness, right? It's hard to
Mhm.
share vulnerably, and that is how we can create deep, connected, understanding relationships, is by being vulnerable. People are afraid to be vulnerable with each other, and it's the antidote to narcissism.
That's
It's
right.
if being strong alone, we need narcissistic defenses to be strong alone. Oh, I'm better than them anyway, is a typical narcissistic defense. You're better together. We are better together. So
Yes.
emotional growth, honestly, we all need to be on an emotional growth, personal growth program. The world is an anxiety provoking, depressing place. It is. It's a mess. We need to be on a personal growth journey, every single one of us, to be able to reach our best version of ourselves. right? And you want to be the best version of yourself so you can be the best partner you can be, and you can be the best parent you can be, and the best community member and sister and brother, and you know, and that comes from nurturing our goodness,
Well,
and
and
that
this
takes intention.
to bring it back to full circle, it's like exactly what you just described. When you do that to a child and you tell the child they're not allowed to share their emotions, they're not allowed to feel their emotions, like
Mm.
you're, and this is a thing I see as I've interviewed a lot of men, and this has come up, but this idea that, you're a boy. You're not supposed to cry. You're supposed to suck it up. Go be tough. Like there's a time and a place. I think, yeah, boys are tough and they're rambunctious. I have a son. I mean, I've seen him grow up. He's rambunctious and crazy, and but there's also a place and a time to embrace that emotional side as well. And if we try to temper that with kids or even in ourselves as we become adults, we try to temper that and we don't feel those emotions like what you said, then we've got an appetite for destruction, because what happens? Those things get stuffed down inside. Then eventually you're going to feel triggered by something. And then all of this is going to be an emotional response that just throws up on everybody. And it's like, that's not healthy. That's not healthy for anyone. So I'm with you. We do definitely agree on that. And how long have you been coaching?
This is new for me. 7 years ago, people did not understand this at all. It just was
Mhm.
not understood. Um, the other thing is too, you type in narcissism and all the bad stuff comes up. You don't find a lot of hope for narcissism and work for narcissism and emotional resources from narcissism. It's only the last few years. When I went through psychotherapy school, they told me I couldn't work with it. And my answer was, but I am. Not sure. I have people come in who self-diagnose, and some that have been diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Um, Sometimes they're wrong when they self-diagnose, but sometimes they're right. Sometimes everything has gone wrong in their life. Their partner hates them, their kids don't like them, they don't know why this is going wrong, they don't know why, and then they're right. Yep, you're absolutely right. You are completely disconnected from others, and that is your problem.
Do you coach people that are narcissistic, or do you coach victims of narcissistic abuse, or both?
Both. Yeah, if you're struggling with narcissism yourself, you're going to have emotional processes that had not grown up. They've just not matured. Forgiveness and compassion are higher emotional processes. In fact, most of the feminine nurturing processes are more evolved processes. We evolved to love each other, and we evolved, empathy and kindness as a way of being. Um, and we need to nurture those. And I forgot what the question was because the ADHD just suddenly went poof.
I said,
Um,
you answered it. I said, do you coach more narcissistic
oh, yeah, yeah.
people?
It
Or
takes the whole family. If a narcissist is in a family, then chances are their behavior patterns with their partner are not ideal.
Mhm.
Probably a bit self-oriented. Usually it's just out of balance where that partner's taking care of their emotional needs way too much, and and they need to learn to take care of their own emotional needs, and in fact start taking care of their emotional needs as well. It takes coaching and empathy. They need to start picturing themselves in their partner's shoes, but it takes a whole family for it to grow up. It's
do you
individual therapy
find
doesn't work very
do
well.
you find though that narcissist, someone who is a narcissist, that they are agreeable to therapy?
No, not usually. It's unless they have everything to lose, right? They have a fantastic partner and they want to keep everything. That's when it happens. But we don't usually use the word narcissism. There's a famous author and therapist in the U.S. His name's Terry Real, and he works with this a lot. He works with a lot of couples who come in where essentially the husband is dealing with a lot of narcissism, but he doesn't single it out either. We we seek to first we stop emotionally abusive behavior, and we seek to change the power divide. In the case of working with couples therapy and narcissism, it's not anything like typical therapy because we do have to take the side of the one that's being oppressed. Typical couples therapy, the therapist is ambiguous and they're not taking sides. In therapy with a narcissist, they need someone to take their side. Um, Absolutely, to balance the power imbalance. Um, and he recognizes himself that we're dealing with patriarchy, and he himself considers himself to be a hysterical narcissist. So he learned as as a man who was out of balance in his expectations and had gender inequalities just built into his being. Essentially, he recognized his own narcissism, and that's why he learned how to do it with other men, to bring them, essentially into the men that we were born to be. I really do believe men are meant to be emotional leaders, not emotional avoiders. Um, if you want to truly be the support of your family and be the man of your family, you need to be an emotional support, as well. You can't leave it all to your partner. It's not meant to be like that. You're meant to be doing it together, right? You're meant to be supporting each other. And sure, we do the things we're better at. Yes, she's better at this, you're better at that, so you push the lawnmower, whatever. But we both are meant to be emotionally connected to each other and to our family members,
Yeah.
right?
There's a lot of
And
blurred
if you're not,
lines.
you're losing out. You're losing out on your
Hmm.
kids, you're losing out on your partner, you're not experiencing them fully when you're suffering from narcissism, because you're not quite with us. You're just a
Well,
little bit separated.
it's a facade. It's not a
Yeah.
it's there's the wall still there that you're not letting someone cross over.
Some of
And
it's true. It's That's why it's complicated, because they can join us in our positive energies, and it might be a real interaction, and they are in our energy. But as soon as they can't join our positive energy, they might fall into a dark energy, and now they're in a different way altogether. So quite often we're
Mhm.
dealing with sort of two different versions. And this
Yeah,
version's real, but it's not self-sustainable. It's only sustainable because you um, are well, essentially filling their cup.
yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah,
Darren, I know like this is intriguing conversation. I do want you to have just a moment to tell people where to find you and kind of what you have going on in case someone wants to reach out or is interested in your coaching.
sure. Um, so I have coaching for narcissism.com. Um, and I also have loveloops.com. Love loops are what we create when love is a feeling in your body, and it feels good to love others. And that's part of the work, is learning to love others. And the more we love them, the more they love us, and it's easier to love them. And that's the kind of loops we want to be creating. So loveloops.com is the book I'm also working on. Um, so they can find me there, and they can find me on Instagram if they would like to add messages, um, both of positive mental health as well as narcissism education. They can visit my social medias.
Awesome. And I'll put all those in the show notes as well so that people have access to that. If you had one thing that you would want to leave my listeners with that just kind of sums everything up, but just kind of that final thought, what would that be?
No matter what's happening for you or anyone, you're having a human experience. You can only have a human experience. Someone who's suffering from narcissism is suffering a human condition. And it's not that they're a bad person, but they have narcissistic defenses for whatever reason they do. And if they can wake up to the reality of their situation, everyone has the potential for growth if they can wake up and accept what is. Um, Neuroplasticity is real. Things aren't set. But at the same time, if someone is not waking up, do not accept being abused. It is not your job to take care of someone else. It is not your job to emotionally regulate the other person. If it is pulling down your mental health, if you think you're in an abusive relationship, you owe it yourself to take care of yourself first, whatever that means. You put on your oxygen mask first, and then take care of the others around you. Because when we run out of oxygen, we just don't become our best versions of ourselves. And yeah, yeah,
That's so
that's what I would
true.
say.
That's so
Mm.
true. Real fast, I'm just curious. Did has your dad ever come to the conclusion that he ever accepted this conclusion that he could possibly be narcissistic?
No, no, he he didn't get there. Um, if he was still around today, maybe he would get there. It's been a few years since he passed. But I only really came into the subject towards the end of his life, and I was able to help his caregivers uh, to deal with him. And lots of people, still saw him as the beautiful, handsome, charismatic Christian family man that he presented to the world. Well, I was relieved. And that was the reality of my experience when he passed. I started singing again when he passed because he had shamed me so much for my singing. Instead of encouraging me into engineering, he had to destroy my love of singing. That's the sort of opposite way they do things. So I had the huge shame response when I sang, and I did stop singing until after he died. Um, you know what? Don't have your children be glad that you're gone. Like you want to invest in your relationships so that when you're at the end of your life, your children want to be with you, aren't there because of obligation, but they want to because of how they feel with you, because they feel loved and cherished with you, right? If that's not how you're making the people feel in your life, embrace a personal growth program, because we are meant to love each other. We are meant to live with love and kindness. We've never lived like we have before in the evolution of our time. We always lived in communities where everyone was on our team. Um, and now we live all separately and we don't know who's on our team. It's a very difficult time to be a human, and you owe it to yourself to give you the resources to emotionally support yourself and to grow as a person, to be your most generous, kind, loving, considerate, respectable version of yourself.
Yes, I
And
agree.
we all can do it, and we can support each other to doing it. And that means not tearing each other down, but building each other up
Mhm.
with very clear boundaries.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true, because just as someone is a narcissist and they, they come with their issues, I truly believe that being an empath also comes with those issues as well. And I think that sometimes as an empath you are a people pleaser. At least this was my experience in my journey as I've gotten to a place now where I've learned. I honestly feel like God spoke this to me. He said, because I was mad when I first learned that I was an empath. I'm like, why am I
Mm.
this way? And I felt like God said to me very clearly, what I've given you is a gift and it's a superpower, but you have to learn how to use it. Just like any other thing. You have an iPhone, that thing is it's like a supercomputer, right? But you have to learn how to use it or you're going to miss out. And I think that empathy and being an empath it's a beautiful thing, but you have to learn how to set boundaries and you have to learn how to move inside of those boundaries so that you're not taken advantage of.
Yeah, yeah, and most of us learn it the very hard way, don't we? We get taken advantage of, and they finally learn the boundaries. Because an empath tends to have so much compassion for the other. They're like, oh, they didn't mean to do that. Oh, they need it more
Mhm.
than I do. Oh, she wants to do that more than I want to do that. Like, yeah, so as an empath, we need to learn to take space and, in fact, to take equal space. And it can be hard for you to take equal space because you're so aware of how much space the other person wants. It's like that. It is a gift of awareness,
It is.
but
Yeah.
it's also difficult. It also means you take in things. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
this is why I truly believe in therapy and coaching and finding different perspectives and not again. I mean, going back to this whole idea of not getting angry, but truly trying to find perspectives that are going to nurture you and help you in your own self growth journey, specifically when it comes to uh, when you have two ends of the spectrum. You have somebody who's extremely empathetic and somebody who's extremely narcissistic, and a lot of times we see these are the kinds of relationships that come together. So it requires self growth on both parts. But I promise you, I do believe this. I believe this with all my heart. When someone can embrace those characteristics, whatever those characteristics are, whether they're narcissism and empath or whatever characteristics that you have, when you can embrace those and learn how to use them effectively, that's where true growth begins, and that's where you begin to thrive as a human because you're using the things that is innately inside of you for good and for helping other people. And that's really what it's all about, in my opinion.
Yeah, Amber, I don't want to keep going because I know we have a lot. We could just keep talking and
We
talking and
could.
talking because, in fact, I didn't even get to the part that narcissism is something that we all have. Every single one of us has narcissism. It's not a bad word, but it's on a spectrum, and there's healthy narcissistic behaviors and there's unhealthy narcissistic behaviors. And you're absolutely right. Healthy narcissistic behaviors, we need people to take the microphone and feel good that they, that about what they're saying. healthy narcissism is okay. We need people to take the spotlight and feel good about it, and enjoy having validation. It's that addiction to endless validation, right? It's when it's off the charts and they can't let you be validated. It's the us versus them, right? There's healthy versions of narcissism and unhealthy versions of narcissism. There's healthy versions of empathy, empaths, and unhealthy versions of
That's
empaths.
right.
Usually in the case of empaths, though, they will self-implode, whereas in the case of narcissism, they'll other implode. So,
Yeah,
the
I
impacts are
agree.
different, but we all need balance.
Yeah, what a way to like drop the mic right before we right before we sum it up. Darren, it's been such a pleasure having you, and I really do appreciate you. I appreciate your conversation, but thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate your extraordinary openness, and you're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.